can go.
Okay. Hi, so I'm here at the GUADEC conference in The Hague in the Netherlands, and I'm talking with Michael Meeks. Michael Meeks works for Novell, and he's one of the very early GNOME hackers. So, hi Michael.
Hi Jeremy, good to see you. Excellent.
So, what got you first interested in GNOME?
Oh, that's quite interesting. Actually, I heard about free software quite early at university. I had a nice fast net connection, so I could play with that. And I guess I downloaded it, and it was lame. It was really lame. It was awesome. I mean, you look out there, and KDE was this cool desktop environment in those days, and it was, it was a lot better. But it was also a trap for freedom, software freedom, as Richard said at that time. So I sort of.
If we could just come in here with a little context to people who might not know what he's talking about. KDE was an alternative Linux desktop that, at the time when it was released, was attached to some software that had a proprietary license. And GNOME was the first Linux desktop that was actually fully free software. So, back to you, Michael.
Yeah. So when you're young, you read all these stories about, the knight joining in on the losing side and that sort of thing. And anyway, so I firmly joined in on the losing side, and it was cool. There were lots of opportunities, there were lots of bugs. I got involved with games, then with Numeric, worked with Miguel, then we invented this component model that we've finally just written out 10 years later, which gives you an idea, of how bad it was. And then sort of evolution and infrastructure, really, IPC infrastructure.
So evolution is actually an email client, which is not the generic Richard Dawkins evolution that he's talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I was, of course, trying to evolve myself, but the email needs were the thing that ended up getting evolved. So that was pretty cool. And we did that for a long time. It turned out IPC is really interesting anyway. There's loads of problems, as Jeremy can tell you.
That would be inter-process control.
And so, you could use it for accessibility and all sorts of other things. So lots of different, divergent things. And of course, since the Corba infrastructure was really relatively difficult to use, Corba is a...
that's an object model in computer science. Sorry, I'm translating here for... I'm assuming that my audience here doesn't speak geek, so I'm actually trying to translate. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, excellent. So, since it was not only a difficult acronym to remember, but also hard to use, I had a lot of business around the place trying to fix it. But anyway, in the end, after we'd got GNOME 2.0 fully working and out there, I switched much of my attention to OpenOffice. So I spent a lot of time on, I guess, the losing side in the Office Suite battles instead. So, that was the new jihad there in some ways. And so we put a huge amount of effort into that, improving it, making it integrate well with the desktop, pretty artwork, allowing it to print nicely, various things like that. So lots and lots of Linux desktop love so that you could use OpenOffice and, not be totally ashamed of your choice on Linux.
Thus proving that there is actually there's only punishment, there is no actual success. Having to work on OpenOffice is indeed a terrible punishment after doing all that work. So I'm actually interested in what your background is. How did you get in? Were you a computer scientist originally? Were you a physicist? Were you some kind of scientist? Or where do you come from?
That's a great question. Well, actually, my mother taught me to program when I was 11 or something, which was pretty cool. She's a maths teacher, but beyond that, I guess I like to program games. So I wrote games with a stolen compiler on a stolen operating system, for a long time, and it was awesome. I loved it. Windows 95 came out, and instead of it crashing every time you had a bug and locking the machine, actually 1 in 2 times you could recover. That was good. But the problem was I became a Christian in my gap year, and there was this whole unethical, I've stolen everything that I'm using to have fun side, and then there was the, oh dear, what am I going to do? So we had a big argument, God and me, about this, and it was kind of one of those internal struggles. And in the end, I gave up, and I used this lame-ass Linux operating system that could do no 3D, there was no gaming APIs, there was absolutely nothing. And that kick-started my career, which kind of is looking pretty good at this point. So, do what he tells you. That's the punchline.
So, GNOME 3 is planned to come out next year. What are some of the exciting features that you see in GNOME 3, and why should people be thrilled about it?
Sure. So I think there's 2 stories here. I think there's continuity, which is very important. It's important that we don't break everything all at once, as some people can do. And then simultaneously there are new things. So I think there are a few new technologies that are really awesome. The GNOME shell is one of them. So the shell provides this new user experience. Of course, you require 3D hardware, and so companies like Red Hat and Intel have been doing a vast amount of work to make that 3D hardware actually work. So it's ready for not just the compiz type effects, but having that on every machine. So not not. So I guess the focus of GNOME is switching to a world in which 3D is built in and works and is everywhere. And that's cool. That's going to enable lots of other things as we move forwards, and it's going to drive that technology everywhere. But of course, if you happen to have a 2D display, there will still be the GNOME panel, and there will still be the old stuff, which will continue working exactly as is. There's a lot of interesting, actually only interesting to developer infrastructural change underneath, so getting rid of deprecated widgets, shrinking the size of things, making them faster. But then there are other technologies like G-object introspection. So previously we've had to write hand-coded bindings, or interestingly created bindings for all the languages. And G-object introspection allows you to dynamically introspect all of your methods and the function arguments that they take in your structures and so on.
So I think what he means is it's going to be easier to write GNOME applications in many different languages.
Yes, that's exactly the point. So yeah, not just many different languages, but any new language you think of. It's going to create a whole new world of awesomeness. So when the Google Go binding is needed, it should be just a few hundreds of lines of code, or well, probably no lines of code given how productive Go is. So
obviously,
there you are.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a nice technology that's coming along. Zeitgeist is a tool to try and extract semantic information from what you're doing. So it'll watch what you're doing like a big brother, and then try and associate files and put things on a timeline and work out what you're doing in a way that hopefully is easy for people to find their information. Because
so that sounds incredibly threatening, and I'm hoping that what you mean by that is actually something that means you don't have to remember exactly where on the disk your data and music and pictures and whatever is, and that essentially you'll have an application there that indexes things on the fly and you can find easily? Am I correct?
Yeah, that's kind of the sum of it. Of course, luckily it's not a web service indexing everything you've ever done. It's all actually on your local machine. So no one can come and read it from elsewhere. But of course, sometimes you want to know what you did, and so the computer is your friendly assistant helping you find what you did a week ago and what you were doing at the time you edited that document, and other things, the music you were listening to whilst, so you can correlate bad music versus bad school reports, or good music versus, so you can learn interesting things about yourself, and that's kind of useful. So that's being written at the moment. There's another thing called Tracker, I guess, which is improving the whole indexing story on the local disk. There's lots of pieces. Evolution, the mail client is improving, better exchange support, better performance, better looks on netbooks, and there's quite a focus on making things look good on netbooks at the moment, and smaller screen form factors, which takes some UI design.
So if the Linux desktop becomes as hopeful as we all hope it's going to be, what are we going to do about the threat from malware and insecure software and attacks from external parties? So what is GNOME doing to make the technology safer for people to use?
Yeah, so I think GNOME is only one part of quite a big problem. I was looking at the security updates for OpenSUSE, which just finished its 2-year lifetime for updates, and libpng was still well up there with like 12 security vulnerabilities in it.
That's the library for displaying
PNG images.
I'm trying to remember what the PNG acronym is. Yes, I'm trying to remember what the acronym stands for. Pictures, basically.
Portable network graphics.
Thank you. Let's just leave it at that. Portable network graphics.
Portable network graphics.
Continue.
Yeah. No. So there are a lot of security vulnerabilities in the underlying platform that's hard for GNOME to be responsible for, but we do some level of auditing, and there are some things that you can do. One of the things actually that people want is to scan for Windows viruses. Actually, the primary virus checking requests that we get are to look for Windows viruses so that we don't propagate them. That tends to be one of the biggest requests, because frankly there aren't really any viruses for Linux that we're aware of yet. So either they're excessively good at hiding and not using bandwidth and not using CPU and not screwing your disk up, or they don't exist, and I think it's likely they don't exist. I think that may change if the Linux desktop, takes off. In China they have a special animal for each year, the year of the possum, the year of the dingbat, the year of the whatever, and we have the year of the Linux desktop, except it's every year. It just goes up and up and up. It's awesome. So, when the year of the Linux desktop comes next year, then hopefully we'll see that more and more people are using it, and then the real hope is that people will start to take us seriously and write malware for us, so that we can really kill it dead.
What a sign of success that will be. Of course, this year is also the year of the Linux desktop, so next year will just be another year of the Linux desktop. So one of the things that's interesting about GNOME, to me at least, is the number of companies that collaborate on it. And so hopefully you've seen, we've talked to people from many different companies, but everybody's focused on doing things together and producing one coherent whole. How do you manage all those different companies working on the same thing?
Yeah, that's a really difficult problem. There are many different models to this. The totalitarian one of having a supreme supposedly benevolent dictator telling everyone what to do actually worked quite well. I mean, we had Miguel back in the day, and those advocates of dictatorship that say it gets things done, well, it did get things done. These days we don't tend to have that same, leadership. We have the release team, which decides what is and what isn't GNOME, and what goes in and the timelines. But yeah, getting companies to work together can be hard, particularly when you get new companies coming in that haven't really contributed a lot before, and as they grow, they usually make all the same mistakes. And Simian made these mistakes, and I think there's the attempt to proprietize, there's the attempt to get time to market advantage by doing it all in private and then dropping it on the project, and all of these things have been shown to fail. And that doesn't stop people trying them again themselves. So, there's some level of learning curve as companies get involved. But actually, there are good ways to do it. I mean, so if you've seen Nokia, actually, I think, had one of the best ways of engaging our community. They hired and created seed companies in the community that did the work. And so, actually, they hired people that knew these things already. So they didn't have to make so many mistakes, which was awesome. And they grew them up without venture capitalists coming in and, with all of the opportunity that they bring for cock-ups. And
doing the magic that venture capitalists do,
all
by themselves, yes.
Screwing each other over. So, actually, and the other benign thing about was that these companies typically had areas of speciality that they tended not to stray out too far and overlap and outcompete each other and destroy the market. So that was really good. I mean, that created, I think, a very, very nice ecosystem. And you see lots of consulting companies that have grown on and moved on from there and diversified, like Calabra, Igalia, CodeThing, Copanissimus. I'm going to get in trouble for forgetting some, but there are a number of small companies like that.
So I was going to say, to finish up, what advice would you give to someone who wants to get involved in the GNOME community? Maybe they're not a coder, maybe they're someone who wants to do translations or write user manuals. How would you recommend that people start?
Sure, so if you're a developer, there's this initiative called GNOME Love, which sounds suggestive, but actually brings you into the project and helps hold your hand to start with. I mean, I think a lot of the developers that get involved tend to be quite awesome, as you see. I mean, not myself, but some of these other people.
Some of the other people you talk to, yes, of course, not you.
And so they turn up and they tend to just give you this beautiful patch, and they tend to have this very introverted worldview, whereas they don't want to, get it out there until it's done. So I think there's probably two kinds of people. One is the extroverts, and we want them to, go away and, perhaps interact and do stuff less. And the other is the introverts. We want them to interact more, so earlier and talk to us and let us help you and don't get stuck and wander away by yourself. So, I don't know. It's kind of difficult. But there are active teams that will try and get you involved and productive on all these
do you have any advice for non-developers who want to get involved?
Yeah, sure. So there are lots of things you can do. You can get like-minded people together and you can run events locally, just for GNOME hackers. Get on the mailing lists. Get involved with the marketing team, I guess. Get involved with translation, particularly. There are lots of things like that. And I suppose, just slide into this great group of cool people. Come to a conference. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. File bugs.
Yes, I think filing bugs is probably a really important thing, because although GNOME is, like all Linux software, perfect, occasionally things go wrong. Occasionally things may go wrong or not do what you expect, and so having the ability to just describe that and articulate the problem so that some of the developers can fix it is an absolutely wonderful way to start participating.
Yeah, completely, and also triaging bugs. So, often we get duplicates of bugs, often bugs need more information to them so the developers can get it, often reporters need hand-holding, so that's a great way to get involved. It doesn't really require anything except a Bugzilla account. So you can comment on a bug and say, this is a great bug report. How about a stack trace? How about a stack trace with debug info installed? Are you sure you're running on HP ARCs rather than a Linux system?
Michael, this is developer stuff. We're not. Okay, you're not really giving advice.
But you can get involved and help.
Non-developers would not be asking for stack traces.
Sure. So but as you learn, you can help to bridge that gap between the people like me and the real users, and that's, I think, a helpful thing to do. So, and the other thing is to just file bugs. I mean, most users of proprietary software are resigned to not having their bugs fixed. They just mentally train themselves to walk around them. So, your normal route of your work goes round all these hidden obstacles that you're even not aware of. And software engineers, unfortunately, get this too. So as they develop the software, they think they've tested it, but actually they knew how the software was designed, and so they tested subconsciously around all the bugs, and someone else comes along and goes, oh, it crashes immediately. They walk straight into the minefield and they don't know. So I think, it's very helpful to file bugs. Even if it seems obvious to you, maybe it wasn't to someone else. Maybe there's something.
Yeah, that's an incredibly important point. One of the really great things about free software that you'll find if you start using it is that things get fixed. People don't like having bugs in their software, especially if it's free software, and the developers care and will actually go out of their way to make things work. So yeah, that's a really important point. So any other thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Well, no, I mean, one of the things I like about Gnome, and having looked at many projects, is I guess it's complete. It's a complete anarchy in some sense. It's not controlled by anyone, and yet it still produces this emergent behavior where we produce good software. So there's no one in charge. There's no one telling you what to do. You can do what you want, and if you do it with other people, you're even more likely to succeed and have fun. So get involved today.
So I guess if we actually understood how it worked, it would immediately stop working. So thanks very much, Michael, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.